frequency at that time, and then that they would come back. And I don't know. I almost think that maybe it's more a product of them not necessarily using those cars very often because they don't have to go to people and say, "Hey, stop talking about this," as often as you might think. And if they did, you'd think they'd have a pretty big budget and they'd be able to buy newer cars. They should be racing around in black Ferraris or something. But it seems like they're probably just people here that are meant to try to quell interest. And in the same way it has been since Project Grudge and Project Sign and even Project Blue Book, maybe.
Oh, I think so. I will say this. Transmitting on a low frequency, your signal is going to go a lot farther than a high frequency. And these,
it is.
And going back at that time frame before they went digital, and which we have for the last 20 years, the signals then, a lot of these big stations were putting out well over 1 million watts of power, transmitting your TV signals. And again, it doesn't have to reach another planet. It could reach maybe a scout ship or scout ships out there. Who knows where it could end up. But I mean, that's just one person's, point of view, because you know what? Nobody has any answers for any of this stuff. None.
Yeah, no, I don't claim to either. I don't claim that I have the answers, but I do also acknowledge the laws of physics and things like that. Like, how far can something go? The laws of physics do govern certain things, especially related to electromagnetic signals and how fast they can travel. They're still bound by the speed of light. So no, I'm not saying that person's wrong by any means. I'm just saying that idea of there being another civilization that close, or even a scout ship that could relay that somehow, it still has to be relayed by some sort of signal that is still bound by the laws of physics. And I don't know, I think it's just important to still to acknowledge it. Nobody should say they have all the answers, and I am definitely willing to say I don't have all of the answers, but I think it's also still important to work within the bounds of science, or at least our current understanding of science. There could be things that we'll know in the future that we don't know now, but when it comes to long-distance space travel, when it comes to the transmission of signals over space, we do have a pretty good sense of what governs that process, and that's going to be the same for other civilizations, if they are out there, as it is for us. So we need to still acknowledge that aspect of the universe, I think.
I think so. Again, too, unless we go into another dimension, we don't even know these so-called UFOs, where they come from. I mean, they could be coming from our future. They could be coming from our past. I don't know if you doing what you do for a living. I look at a lot of things strangely. And sometimes I think we've been rebooted on this planet once or twice already, where life started over. But, when you look at the Sphinx, you look at the pyramids, now they're realizing they're a lot older than what they are. We have never been able to figure out how they built the pyramids. Seriously. I mean, we got ideas, and some of these ideas, hey, it's interesting. But again, if you really think about it, I don't think any of the ideas would really hold up. We just don't know what created them. Sometimes, I think that maybe at one point that we were visited by aliens, maybe for our resources on our planet, and they brought, humanoids down to work the mines or whatever to get whatever our planet had, what they were looking for. And that's how, life as we know it maybe started. I don't know. It's every day something new is coming out.
Yeah, I mean, in the mainstream news, there's things that come out that could make it seem like a lot of different things are possible. But again, I think this is just a disconnect between science and the mainstream public, and I don't say that as a negative thing. It's just an unfortunate aspect of what we do as scientists, is that we talk to each other in very esoteric jargon and very specific terminology that's not something that gets put out very often unless there's a big discovery or something important happens. But we actually do have a very good understanding of how life started and the long history of prokaryotes and then eukaryotes, multicellular organisms that eventually evolved into sea creatures and then fish-like creatures. And then they came out and they had the ability to breathe air, which still exists today. You can go to the Portland Zoo and see lungfish in the same way they existed in the ancient past. And then there's this long history of evolution that is very well documented, and especially when you get into human evolution, especially as you talked about more recently with the development of culture and civilizations. Once we got agriculture, we started to gather around and work together, and we were able to build things because there were more of us. And the reason there were more of us is because we had a surplus from agriculture. So we have all of these grains that we can store that can feed people through the winter, and so they stay there. They don't have to leave to go out foraging anymore. And then they can start building things like pyramids and the Sphinx and all of these great civilizations that we have today. The skyscrapers that we see today are the exact same thing as pyramids, just in a more advanced form. So we don't necessarily need some sort of extraterrestrial influence. We can clearly see and studying the ancient past through archaeology and through looking at our human genetics and other anthropological tools that there was just this continuous change. And it's more boring that way. I'll admit that
oh, yeah.
that we it's not as fun as saying aliens came down and did this, but we actually can see a very consistent, unbroken chain of progress. We don't need that extraterrestrial influence. And in fact, if anything, it's the things that we see now are probably just our future descendants who have the same characteristics that we've evolved over the last 6 million years of human evolution, the bigger brains and the smaller faces and the larger eyes and the greater technology and the ability to communicate with us in our languages. Those are probably individuals coming back from our future, but that doesn't necessarily mean they gave us things or they're interjecting themselves in order to build the things that we were very easily able to build at those times. So I don't think we necessarily need that extraterrestrial influence or explanation, because there really is a long history of human advancement that explains all of that already.
Well, one thing, too, I've done a lot of research, like the Sphinx. And now here, at the last couple months, they were talking now the pyramids, that they were under an ocean at one point. Now, if you believe that theory, that the Sphinx, from the wear marks on the Sphinx, for years they said it was caused by sand, blowing against it and wearing it. Then, in the last couple of years, they come to a conclusion, or some major scientists come back and said, no, the Sphinx was under the ocean at one point, and that's how the wear marks formed on the Sphinx. Again, recently now, they're talking about the pyramids were under the water at one point, under an ocean. So if that's the case, then I'm just wondering how man fits in there. And it's funny, man can build these great big buildings, but how long do these buildings last before they would start to crumble? The technology we have, we came and cut the blocks that were cut with a precision that was used in building the pyramids, let alone figuring out how to move these heavy stones and place them on top of each other and transport them there. It's just things yet.
Here's the big thing, though. Here's the big thing that's different, is that they built those with slaves. And we built the skyscrapers with arguably slave labor, immigrants that came from Ireland and many Wales and many other places, but they still had to be paid. But if we had slaves to build those things, they would last for millennia. But they were able to use slave labor because it was, like you said, we're a warring species, and we always have been. And at the time of the rise of early civilizations and the Neolithic Revolution, there was a lot of conquering and there was a lot of slave taking, and those things could be built in that way because that one slave made to pound away at that piece of stone for a whole day, which sounds horrible to us because it was horrible to them too. Over the course of thousands of years, they can build something that will last thousands of years. But in a marketplace where you have a time frame, you have to build this thing quickly. There's economics involved, and you have to pay people to do it. So you're incentivized to cut costs. You want to boost your bottom line by cutting labor in order to build something quickly. So it's not about whether we could build something that would last for thousands of years. It's about the economics of building something that will last for thousands of years.
Well, Mike, though, the issue, too, is, okay, the Romans, for example, had a cement far superior than any cement that we could ever come up with that lasted how many years? Our cement, when they make cement, it gets stronger as it gets older, and then at a certain point, it breaks down. The stuff that the Romans or pre-Romans made out of cement, I know that they come to a conclusion that it was used with salt water, ash, and some other stuff in it, but it's far superior than any type of concrete we can make today. We don't even know how to do it, and the technology was lost. But that's why we still see some of these old buildings, still standing. And yes,
or do we though? Maybe it comes down to economics again. We could have had light bulbs that lasted for 10 years. We could have had batteries that lasted much longer than they do. But the companies that are tasked with making them want us to keep buying them, so they make them primitive. They don't want us to have a battery that lasts for a year because they want us to keep buying them. And now even when we can buy LED and the CFL light bulbs, they're really expensive to try to help them cover the costs of the thing that they already had and could have been giving us a long time ago. So I don't know. I think we still need to factor in the economics of it and how corporations work and how companies work and how profit margins work.
Oh yeah, it could be all that into it. Now we're going to be going for a break. So if you want to get yourself maybe a cup of Java or something, we're going to take like a 3-minute break, and we'll be back in 3 minutes. I'm going to put you on hold, so don't hang up.
Over and over If you would like to hear Night Dreams Talk Radio on your local radio station, let them know. Tell them to check out www.nightdreamstalkradio.com.